All right. Well, good afternoon. Glad you could join us. My name is Phil Brink. I'm the consulting coordinator of Colorado Cattlemen's Ag Water Network, and I am joined today by Sarah Didrikson. She is with Colorado Cattlemen's, and she is in the background helping make sure this webinar goes smoothly. So today we are going to be talking about an irrigation trial. We're going to be hearing from TJ Knecht of LoPresti Farms down near Pueblo and Greg Peterson, who is the executive director of Colorado Ag Water Alliance, better known as CAWA. TJ received a grant through CAWA's Ag Drought Resilience grant project to see if soil moisture probes could help him schedule irrigation sets better. And maybe save some water as well. So that's what we're going to be going over before we jump into TJ's presentation. Greg, can you give us just some background on CAWA's Ag Drought Resilience Grant Project?
Yeah, so thank you, Phil. So we were awarded money. It's been about a bit over 3 years ago now, to essentially re-grant funds to farmers and ranchers around the state and make it easy for them to then implement their own projects to help with drought. And those projects have involved alternative crops and forages, irrigation improvements like irrigation scheduling, um, different ways of managing livestock, soil practices. And the purpose of that was to just provide an opportunity that was easy for them to apply for, but then also collect data from these projects and really try to identify, okay, what's cost effective, where are we seeing results, and what's worthwhile for us to focus on in the future for scaling up. And we funded a number of irrigation scheduling projects. And irrigation scheduling is not new technology. This has been around for decades, but it's also rarely used in Colorado. And later on, I'll get into why. And there's good reasons and some real obstacles to why it isn't used that well. And from a lot of these projects, we were able to come away with what do we think we need going forward to make a successful irrigation scheduling project. And a lot of that is really involved in TJ's project here, and a great example of that. And so I'll be talking a little bit later, higher, just a up of what did we learn from these projects in general, and what are obstacles, and what do we think going forward to make successful irrigation scheduling projects. But I'll just leave it to TJ.
Sounds good. We'll circle back, Greg. TJ, if you want to start sharing your screen, and while you do that, just a couple of notes. We are recording today's webinar, so we will get that recording posted on our website, agwaternetwork.org. And we will also be posting TJ's slides, so that'll be available as well. If during the presentation you have a question, you can put that in the chat anytime. You can, if it's a burning question and you really need to ask it right now, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question. Otherwise, please stay muted until the end and we'll have a Q&A session. So TJ, we can see your screen okay. You
Okay,
started
and you can hear me
this.
all right?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. So you started this back in 2023, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about LoPresti Farms and why you started this project and how it's gone.
Yeah. So my family runs LoPresti Farms in Vineland, just east of Pueblo. We grow field corn, pinto beans, pumpkins, and the beloved Pueblo chili. I'm the third generation on the farm. Grew up here, got an agronomy degree, and spent some time as a crop consultant before I came back to the farm in 2020. That experience off the farm is kind of what exposed me to soil moisture sensors and got me interested in them. Here on our farm, everything is furrow irrigated with ditches and siphon tubes. So it's kind of old school, but uh, but it's what we have and it's what we work with. I know there's some other efficiency things that we could be looking at. You know, some people might ask, why don't you just put in a pivot? But the way our farms are set up here with small fields and a lot of diverse crops, we're not really set up for pivot irrigation. So I wanted to try and find a way to be more efficient with the system that we have, which is a furrow system. our water source is a combination of surface water from the Bessemer ditch and groundwater from irrigation wells. The way my family has traditionally irrigated is 24-hour sets. So in for irrigation, we don't have the same control over how much water we put on and when we put it on that other systems do. But 24-hour sets has kind of been the norm around here. It always has worked well. We grow pretty good crops. It works good with the timing of our ditch deliveries. So we typically get a run in at noon. We would set it, run 24 hours, change it, run 24 hours, and then our run goes out 2 days later. So it's convenient time as well. The argument was always that we were getting a good deep soak with the 24-hour set. The same way they want you to water your lawn infrequently but deep. So that's what we've always done. But I kind of started to wonder if there was some room to improve there, especially when I started paying attention to the flow meters on our wells. All our wells are metered, so we know exactly what we're pumping. And I started doing some math and looking at how much we were pumping and how much we were putting on. And in a typical irrigation of a 24-hour set, it's like 6 inches of water, which is a lot, probably more than some soils could hold and more than some crops could use at certain times of year. So that kind of got me started questioning it, then I looked to soil moisture sensors as a way to be more efficient. And I came across this CAWA Drought Resiliency grant program, and it really appealed to me because it was a pretty simple application. There wasn't a bunch of government lingo in it, and it was super approachable. As I was writing my application, I was able to work with Greg and Phil to make sure it was competitive. So it was a really cool place to start for somebody new to writing grants for kind of a small scale project like this. And so we set out to answer the question, is there a benefit to soil moisture sensor based irrigation in a furrow system on a ditch? And so it's been an ongoing project for 3 years. I'm going to kind of work through the 3 years and show what I did and what I learned. We started in 2023, and the first thing we did was put in a Davis weather station. So this is a completely wireless weather station. It's all solar powered and communicates with a cell modem. Collects a whole bunch of weather data, temperature, humidity, wind, rain, and records it as well. So I've got a record of all that, and uploads it to the cloud every 5 minutes so I can get that on my phone all the time. I love our weather station. Still use it all the time. We use it for irrigation stuff and non-irrigation stuff. We use it deciding whether to go spray or decide if I need to make adjustments because I've got a big rain. That site-specific weather data has been really valuable for all of our farm, not just irrigation. But that was one part of the of our soil moisture sensor program that year. The actual sensors were hooked up to this solar powered deal, which is called a node, which radio communicates with the weather station, and that's what uploads it to the cloud. This first year, it was a little bit of a farmer job. Kind of, used what I had available to me and started out with these watermark tensiometer sensors, which is a pretty cheap standard basic sensor. I kind of built them out to get them to the depths I wanted. So I installed them at 6 inches, 18 inches, and 30 inches. And then used the Davis software to track that data. So those were sending me readings throughout the season. Didn't really make any big changes to my irrigation program that year. It was kind of just a learning year where we wanted to see how our typical practice of 24-hour sets influences soil moisture. This is our first stab at a graph. I think probably when I sent this in to Greg at the end of the year, he might have wondered why I had my 3-year-old do my reports, because that system was not set up for irrigation scheduling. It's basically a weather tracking app, and so it didn't give me any tools to interpret the data. So that was our first big challenge, was figuring out what to do with this. It spit out this graph, and then I had to make some sense of it. The units on the side here are centibars. So those tensiometers measure pressure, which is a representation of how hard roots have to work to pull moisture from the ground. So the higher the pressure up here, the harder roots are working, and the drier the soil is. Down here is wet. Across the bottom, this would be the course of the season. So from the day I installed the probes to the day I pulled them out. Another challenge in our furrow system is that we make a lot of equipment passes over the field. So we run a row cultivator to make our rows or ditches, and kind of got to work around those equipment passes. So I can't get my sensors in right at the beginning of the season. I got to wait until the first couple cultivations are done. So I kind of annotated this graph to show what I was doing. Each of these yellow lines is my irrigation events. Those were all 24-hour sets based on our standard practices. Calculated out the amounts applied, so 5, 4, 7 inches per irrigation for a season total of 33 inches applied. And we know that's not all captured in the root zone. Some of it's lost to runoff, some of it's lost to evaporation and percolation below the root zone. But that's what I applied. Again, the hardest part was setting this irrigation threshold or allowable depletion or a trigger point. I kind of came up with this number based on some research and knowing our soil textures, uh, and but wasn't too confident in it. Wasn't quite willing to totally change our system based on a number that I wasn't confident in. So that was the first year. Again, didn't make any changes, but kind of started to learn about soil moisture sensors. The next year was 24, and we kind of decided we needed to set this up as a side-by-side trial to really evaluate the technology on our farm and see if it made a difference. So I split a field again on corn. I chose corn for this project all 3 years because it's our biggest crop by acres and it's our biggest water user. So I split a field of corn in half, and the plan is to irrigate half based on our standard practice, which is 24-hour sets every 3 or 4 weeks as water is available. And then the other half of the field, I irrigated based on soil moisture sensors. The other change we made this year was switching to a different soil moisture sensor, and I picked Crop X probes. Uh, there's a number of different ones out there. I think more so than the brand, the biggest importance is like local support and technical support. So I picked these CropX ones because I have a dealer here that was willing to work with me on them. I really like the way the sensors are set up on these. So when you install them, you drill a hole to 26 inches, and then they got this auger flighting, and the sensors are out here on the flighting. So when you stick them in the ground and screw them in, the sensors end up out in the undisturbed soil. That's different than a lot of other probes where the sensors are all on the main shaft. And so you have more chance of getting like air pockets or a disturbance that doesn't reflect your sort of native soil when you stick a probe in the ground. But this one seemed to me that there was less chance of that and should get better data. Pretty easy install. They send you this auger and drill a hole to the line and then screw the probe in. This is a look at how it looks in season. So I put them in the row between two corn plants. And as far as where in the field, I put them near the side of the field where I start irrigating. That way, when the probe tells me I can, begin the field. And I placed one near the top or the head end of the field where my water starts, and one near the bottom or tail end of the field. The general recommendation for furrow irrigation is to put it near the bottom because we know that part of the field gets less water, and if we want our probes to bias dry or make sure that the bottom end of the field has enough water, we put them down there. But I really wanted to see how different the top and the bottom ends of our field were. And so I got one at the top, one at the bottom. They're in the same row. So they're picking up irrigation at the same time. The field we put them on is a loam texture, really good soil, high producing ground. We know we can grow good crops there. It's got a really low slope. It's like a 0.5% slope. So it definitely absorbs a lot of water. It takes a lot of water to reach the tail end. But that means it could grow some pretty good corn. These CropX probes cost about $1,000. And then once you buy them, you own them, and you pay a subscription every year to keep them active. I picked fields here that I can irrigate with a well. I can get some ditch water there too, but the benefit to irrigating with the well is it gives me a way to measure flow. That was one of the biggest things I picked up on right away was you really need to know how much water you're applying. And under a ditch system, we often have no idea. So this has brought a lot of awareness to learning how much water we put on, and uh, using that to be a better irrigator. This is the probe at the end of the year, coming out of the ground. So again, you just screw them in, screw them out. Pretty easy install and removal. I think they're pretty stout. If it's dry, I've cranked on them pretty hard and haven't had any issues. I've had them in and out 3 times now and no problems. But the big thing that was better about this system than my first year was the software tool that they provide to make use of the data. So CropX is an irrigation scheduling company. That's what their software is about. These are screenshots from the mobile app. They've got a app one and a internet one. And so these are my two probes, the one at the top of the field, the one at the bottom of the field. This is kind of the home screen that you get to in the app. And what I really like is this sort of dummy proof, red, green, blue soil moisture status. It gives you an indicator of where you were yesterday, where you are today, and where they expect you to be tomorrow. And when you approach this refill line, that's when you're supposed to start irrigating. And so this is pretty clear. If I'm on the go, I can pull this up on my phone at a glance, see where I need to be, see if I need to start thinking about getting water to this field in the next couple of days. So that's what I use most when I'm looking at this data. You can see more in-depth stuff on the app, but it's a little hard to look at the graphs on the phone. So if I want to dive deeper in, I go on the computer, pull up the website, and can get a lot more detail. So again, I've got both my probes here, top and bottom. This graph, again, shows the dates across the bottom. So this is the whole growing season from start to finish. On the left axis is inches of water, which is more uh, approachable or manageable for me than Centibars what the watermark sensors spit out. I can really grasp inches of water. I can understand what my crop water use is and know that if this thing's saying I got a couple inches of available water, I can calculate how long that's going to last me if my corn's using so many inches of water a day. So it's a more useful format, uh, but the Hardest part of this whole deal and making it useful is setting the thresholds. And so on these graphs, the top line is represents a full profile. So these graphs are opposite of the watermark ones where at the top is wet, lots of water, bottom is dry, no water. Top line represents a full profile, bottom line represents your irrigation trigger. CropX does give you these lines to begin with. So they set them when you put the probes in the ground based on your soil texture. And then CropX will adjust them through the year based on what the probes are seeing. But if you can see the beginning of the season on my bottom probe, I was in the red all the time. So the moisture drops. This is where I irrigate. Moisture drops. This is where I irrigate. So pretty quickly figured out that there was no way I was ever going to be able to manage in this narrow range. And that's because I'm in a furrow system where I'm putting on a lot of water infrequently. These narrow ranges work for a pivot where maybe you can kick your pivot on and put on an inch of water every week or twice a week. But in our system, that's unrealistic. So we kind of had to shift to more of a deficit approach where we know we're probably going to induce some stress down here, um, but it's the only way I'm ever going to be able to keep up. So CropX helped me kind of adjust these lines to represent our furrow system. The bottom probe tended to dry out quicker than the top, so that's what I used as my trigger. So after we got this threshold changed, I essentially tried to keep the bars between the lines in the green, and was able to do a pretty good job this year, again in 24. But that was a super wet year, so we had tons of water available, way more than we're used to. I kept track of all my irrigations. I've got on the left here my sensor-based side of the field, and on the right, grower practice, dates of irrigations, length of the set in hours, and how much water I applied in inches. And so the sensor side, I watered 12 times. The grower standard practice side, I watered 9 times. That's way more than we're used to doing. Typically, we might get 5 or 6 irrigations in a season. So wet year, more water than average, but going off the sensors, even more water than normal, like tons of water. Totaled up 5 acre-feet applied on the sensor-based side, which is a ton, like way more than what corn needs in a year. So kind of knew that I needed to do some tweaking to the probes and where those lines were to better reflect, what corn needs and what might be realistic in a more typical year. I didn't change much in our length of irrigations this year, partially because I didn't have full trust in the data yet. So I played with them a little bit. I ran a few shorter sets and one longer one, but mostly stuck with 24 hours because I wasn't all the way confident in the data. Uh, so the results that we were driving at is okay, so that's your applied water. Let's take it all the way to yield. And so we split the field at harvest. Uh, Really wet year, really good ground. We had some awesome yields. The sensor-based side yielded 297 bushels per acre, and the standard side was 288. So pretty similar, a little better on the sensor side. Uh, Ran some numbers, and I'm not an economist, so I don't. This is sort of a simple analysis, but gross, we sold our corn for 490. The sensor-based side grossed $1,455 per acre. Standard practice side, 1,411. All the other expenses like seed, fertilizer, chemical, land are all equal. So I just subtracted out the cost of the water here. Calculated the cost of our water based on what we pay for pumped water per acre foot, and what we pay for electricity to pump the water. So that's my irrigation water expense, and then figured it out per acre. And then put a labor cost to it. It's always tough to we irrigate ourselves. It's always tough to put a value on your own work. But I figured these costs as if we were hiring an irrigator to change water for us. And then figured in the expense of the probes. And this trial was on a small field, but kind of for the sake of an assumption, I figured the per acre cost as if we were working with a 40 acre field, which is our typical field size. And this year I figured one probe per field and a lifespan of 5 years and amortize it over those 5 years. So using those assumptions, it works out to $10 an acre. Net on the sensor side, 1,215. On the standard, 1,227. So really similar. And basically, I think we kind of hit the point of diminishing returns where we put so much water on those three extra irrigations on the sensor-based side didn't increase yield enough to pay for the added expense of the water and the labor to change it that often. Okay, so that was year two. Kind of figured, all right, we're getting closer to a good trial here. And a little more trust in the probes. I think we've got a good setup. Mostly kept everything the same for 25, repeated the same trial. But the big change we made was I needed to get some technical assistance to understand the data better and be able to interpret it and turn it into actionable information. So we enlisted the help of Roxy McCormick. She's a consultant in Northeast Colorado. Uh, Never had to come down here to the farm. It wasn't a ton of assistance, but I just needed another set of eyes to look at my numbers. Uh, it helped that she was independent, so she doesn't work for CropX. She was able to look at the data unbiased and help me interpret it and really help me dial in uh, those bumpers or the thresholds for a full profile and where our irrigation figure should be. I also in 25 added some simple tensiometers, just like the really old school ones that you go out and read manually, right next to my probes to ground truth what they were saying and make sure that they matched up with the true conditions of the field. So again, this is the same profile sum graph that we saw before. This is for 25. Dates on the bottom, inches of available water on the side. These thresholds were set with the help of Roxy, and I felt a lot better about using them to trigger my irrigations. I still think there's probably some room to refine them. That's the most important part. I've seen some other systems that this line is not a line, but more of a arc over the course of the season, where maybe beginning in an early and late, you're willing to induce a little more stress, but at peak uptake, you maybe want to bump that threshold a little bit higher and make sure you don't stress your crop. So I think there's some room to improve, but for the most part, felt pretty good about these trigger points. Uh, Starting irrigation before the crop got too stressed. Interestingly, this year we didn't see as much of a difference between the top and bottom probes. They were both hitting the triggers about the same point, but the top trended a little bit drier, which is unusual. And the explanation that we came up with was this field with such a low slope, those siphons are running so fast that um, that first little bit of the field, there maybe that water's running too fast and not having a chance to soak in. I still think there's a lot to learn about the difference between the top and bottom, and um, not sure that we can do anything different management wise, but it's interesting to know the differences. So 25 was more of a typical year. As far as our total amount of water available, our ditch allocation was close to average, our precip was close to average. And so these totals kind of better reflect what we would have in a typical year. My sensor-based side, I irrigated 6 times for a total of 3 acre-feet. My grower standard practice side, I irrigated 7 times for a total of 5 acre-feet. So my sensor-based side, I saved about a third of the water. And the big reason for that is because I was willing to cut back our set time to 16 hours. Because I had that technical support, felt pretty good about the data. I was willing to make those changes, saved a third of the water, and all season long the crop looked pretty good. I felt pretty good about it, and it was definitely a good year for a trial. These 16-hour sets are a little harder on the irrigator. We get it run at noon. I set it at noon. That means I got to change it at 4 a.m. the next morning and then 8 p.m. the next night. So a little more work, but it turned out to be worth it this year. When we took it to yield, the sensor-based side yielded 317 bushels per acre, standard side 321. So again, the yield is really close. Figured out the gross, subtracted out the cost of the water. Again, the only difference in 25, my probe expense is up to $20 per acre because I decided every time I do this, I'm going to want 2 probes per field. I got to have one at the top and one at the bottom to make sense of the differences as the water flows across the field. So a little more expense in the probes. Comes out to a net on the sensor side, $1,140. Standard side, $1,106. So a net difference of $33 per acre more on my sensor-based side, with a third less water. So, really, really, really cool results that year. Wouldn't say that's going to be the case across the board. This was a small scale trial, and took a lot of close management on my end, but definitely shows a lot of promise in this technology, and it's got me excited about it, and want to share it with you guys, and hope it helps somebody else. A few last things I kind of wanted to drive home that I learned over the course of this whole project. There was a large chunk of my time that got invested in this. It was not nearly as easy as I thought, where you stick the probes in the ground and then your phone beeps and you turn on the pump. Um, it took a lot of investment, and really had to be willing to make it work on our farm. And so I'm sure it'd be the same for everybody else. If you want these to work, you got to make it work. I think if you just maybe get some grant money to stick them in to check a box, probably not gonna get the same results that I did. It took a lot of time to trust this data. Uh, 3 years before I was really willing to make any big changes. The technical assistance is critical. That's really what kind of kicked me over the edge to be willing to make some changes. And that comes from a dealer who sells it to you, the manufacturer who makes it, and hopefully from an outside source as well. As I go forward, I don't see myself like going out and buying a bunch of probes and putting them in every field right away. I've got them in another field this year. My grant ran out, so I'm just continuing on my own. Uh, but the lessons I learned from those 3 years are really valuable, whether I have a probe in a field or not. We learned about how water moves across our fields and through the soil. We learned about variability across the field from top to bottom. We learned about where our roots are and at what point in the season they reach various depths, and where they're pulling moisture from. Uh, Better understanding of when our crops are using water, better understanding of how much water we're putting on. All that stuff is useful across the whole farm. I'm using it this year. This year is sort of the year we were afraid of when we started this trial. It's super dry. We got like less than half of our normal water. And so the concern is, well, if you have a moisture probe and it tells you to irrigate, it doesn't matter if there's no water available. Uh, but I'm still using what I learned. So this year, uh, I got no doubt that a 16-hour set is enough in some fields in some situations. So we're using that to our advantage this year, where typically we would continue to run long 24-hour sets. This year we've been cutting them back 16, 18 hours, keeping things moving a little quicker. We know we're putting on less water. But so far it's working. We're stretching our water a lot further than we're used to. Crops still look pretty good. And I think the lessons are gonna continue to help us in the future. Um, definitely a lot of potential in this technology and the other stuff, the other lessons that come along with it. So that's what I've learned and where we're going. And I think whenever Phil wants to take questions, we can do questions.
Yeah, we can roll into that. One question I had is you put in tensiometers this last year. Did they match what you saw with the soil moisture sensors?
Yep, yep, they did. So they were just the basic ones. Set them in the ground right next to my fancy probes, and they confirmed the trends. Maybe not the same day as far as an irrigation trigger, but the trends is what really uh, was confirmed. Maybe a little bit drier at the top and a little bit wetter at the bottom, and maybe a little bit, drier on the surface and wetter down below. So it helped ground truth what the crop X probes were saying.
So, TJ, before we go further, it might be helpful. You're an agronomist, you understand what consumptive use is. And somebody could read the headline here of this webinar and say, well, okay, so I see that you only applied 3.2 acre feet on the trial side, but you applied 5 acre feet on the other. You got approximately the same yield. So therefore you saved 1.8 acre feet of water. Can you speak to what the consumptive use side of that actually says in terms of how much the crops actually used?
Yeah, so I think like a big corn crop uses something like 2 acre-feet of water uh, for the season. That's what the consumptive use. So the rest, the balance of that is the inefficiencies in our furrow irrigated system, which is just the nature of the way we irrigate. That additional water that isn't consumed by the crop is lost from our farm, but it's not lost from the overall system. That's coming back in as return flows for people downstream.
So when we talk about the 3.2, you applied less, but you didn't actually reduce the consumptive use.
Yeah, yeah, that's correct. I was
Yeah.
just more
Yeah,
efficient with what I
it's
applied.
just it's really important that people understand that distinction is that just because what less water was applied, how it was applied and switching to 16-hour sets versus the 24, managing it when the crop needed it most, allowed you to apply less, but the crop ended up using, we assume, about the same, maybe even slightly more than the standard practice side of the field, right?
Right. Yep, that's a good point.
So we got a question from Owen. Is it fair to say your production and profit stayed pretty much the same per acre, but the importance here is that we are water stressed in future years. Your amount of water can be reduced significantly while still getting the same approximate production.
Yeah, yeah. So that was the question when we started. Are we trying to apply the same amount of water and grow more yield, or are we trying to save water and not sacrifice yield? And really, what we need to do is save water here. And so the goal is to be more efficient with our water without sacrificing yield.
Do you have a yield monitor on your combine, and did you see differences between the top and bottom of the field?
We do not. It's this thing right here. It's pretty old school. We just we just weighed truckloads from both sides of the plot. Unfortunately, no good way to know top versus bottom.
Marilyn had a question. Do you have any idea how this would apply to other crops in terms of would it be equally applicable, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Um, the root depth of different crops is different. Uh, but you can set that in crop X. You can choose which depth you're managing. So it would work on shallow rooted crops. I was a little hesitant to put this on any of our produce vegetables because there's not as much information out there about irrigation scheduling for those crops and maybe what your triggers should be. And we typically don't want to stress our vegetables at all. Whereas the corn, I'm willing to take it down to some level of stress. So that's why I lean towards the corn. But I think it could be useful on lots of other crops.
Yeah, TJ, with that, I guess for like if for some reason you were interested on trying that on your pumpkins, you'd almost it sounds like okay, we would it would be a maybe a 2, 3 year process, and you need someone like a Roxy McCormick, but who could tell you, yes, this is what you need for pumpkins, where that might be harder to find someone with that experience. Is that probably a good what it would look
Exactly.
like? No,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Question from Justin, to make sure I understand the irrigation system, you are pumping from an aquifer. Was the cost of the pumping accounted for in your profit analysis? And I believe you said, yeah, that was the electricity cost of running that pump.
That's correct. Yep.
So one of the great challenges, and you alluded to this a little bit, is when you're using any type of sensor, is trying to figure out your specific soil type. How closely did these, when you installed these and you knew your soil type from the soil survey, you knew you had a loam, how well did the CropX software predict, initially when you installed it, how the soil type, water holding capacity?
Uh, it- that first year I tried to just trust what CropX came up with. And so I kind of let it do its thing. It pulled soil textures from Web Soil Survey, and set those thresholds based on that. Uh, but then that's where those first years, it was giving me such a narrow range that it was unrealistic. And so I started getting a soil texture analysis done, where I install my probe. So I pull a sample and send it off, get the exact texture with percents of sand, silt, and clay. And then that seemed to help kind of dial in those numbers. But really it was having Roxy who was willing to make changes to those thresholds that was needed. Uh,
So you actually had to make multiple adjustments to it.
yep.
Greg, did you want to circle back and talk more about the Ag Drought Resilience Grant project?
Well, yeah, and just kind of so summarize what we've been learning from these irrigation scheduling projects. So I'm going to share my screen real quickly. Oh, let me send a request. So we had a number of projects like this, and we had some successful and some that flat out weren't. And even from those, we learned quite a bit about these kinds of irrigation scheduling projects, and we've started really summarizing those results going forward. And I mean, from talking to dealers, people at Colorado State University, USDA, our best guess is probably less than 5% of irrigators in Colorado use this kind of advanced irrigation scheduling technology. And it's one of those rare methods that improves irrigation efficiency, and it can also be a water conservation method because if we can reduce that soil evaporation, it's possible, and that can range quite a bit depending on practices, soil, and the system in the farm. Um, but from a lot of these projects, we really learned that there's times where this it just doesn't make sense, and it's really hard to justify using the technology or the cost. For example, you have a lot of people who have a very short irrigation season, and maybe junior water rights, or they're just on a tributary that sees water for a month. They're going to use the water when they get it. And often they're going to flood their fields as much as they can and rely on that. And then also with irregular irrigation deliveries, you have a lot of systems, large systems on the South Platte where you have rotations, and you're gonna get water when you get water, and that can be a bit more difficult. It's not impossible, but sometimes it can be really difficult to do that irrigation scheduling on top of that. And then like we had one project also that was just, it was not cost effective, where the cost for them to do this on their fields, and they weren't, unlike TJ, they were not pumping water, so they didn't have pumping costs, electricity costs. They had really inexpensive water, and they had a very expensive system, and that just didn't make sense for them. And that's going to happen. Then there's a lot of places where it can make sense. And I was already put this down of a full supply of water definitely helps, but it's not necessary. I mean, if you're water short, especially in years like this year, I mean, are you going to be saving water? No, but you're going to be applying it in a better way throughout the season. And that can be very helpful. On demand water, where you have water consistently throughout the season, whether you're on a very large irrigation ditch system with reservoir storage, or you're on groundwater or augmentation water, that really helps a lot too. And also expensive water. If it's whether you're paying for pumping fees, power costs, or just the cost of your water in some districts, that provides some real incentives to use this kind of technology. But, and Phil and TJ mentioned this, I mean, and about historical consumptive use and conservation improvements. And you can get that. It really depends on the plumbing around the farm. And like a great case is groundwater. Like if you're a groundwater user out on the Eastern Plains and you're reducing how much you pump, it's staying right there in the system. And that's, we can say that, we can quantify that. If you're in some systems where water with a reservoir and it's like piped and pressurized, and we know exactly what's being delivered to a field, like the Dolores Water Conservancy District is a great example of that. We can also leave more water in the reservoir. But those are, a lot of times we're moving the water around, we're changing return flows, but there are some opportunities for conservation here. And some things to really consider when implementing these projects. The biggest one is time. We rarely saw anybody make changes within a year. Often it would take 2 to 3 years. And you often see in the first year people just going over the data and comparing it to what they do. And that can take a lot of time. It takes years for these projects. And then probably the next most important factor was technical support. I don't know if I mean, you'll see some of these equipment advertised as easy or no support needed. I personally don't believe that. I think you're gonna need help. And what does that look like? I mean, it can look like being able to call someone who doesn't work for the company, who you can trust their information. It can be having someone nearby to respond to problems within 24 hours or 48 hours. For example, we had one project down near Alamosa, a farmer using a really great piece of technology, autonomous pivots. But the problem was the nearest tech assistance was in Goodland, Kansas, and it was out for 2 months in the middle of the season. And if you can't get someone there within a day or two, it's just not worth it. For a lot of that. And that can be we ran across that at a number of projects where we had people trying different kinds of soil moisture probes, sensors, and they just could not get any support when something went wrong. Easy to read. TJ used the term dummy proof, and I'm seeing that more and more often with a lot of these interfaces where colors are great. If they have, okay, it's green, it's red, it's yellow. And if you want to go into the data, it's there. But one company I've talked to, they have it tracked that most irrigators who use their equipment only look at it for less than a minute a day. And having something that's easy like that, where other equipment I've seen where like it gives you a % of soil moisture capacity, Most of us aren't going to make any sense of that. And a lot of us are going to say, well, what does this mean? How do I interpret that? So, really easy to read interface, and then trusting the data, like being able to get an outside source like TJ did with Roxy McCormick, that helps a significant amount. And being able to verify that, I really liked what you did, TJ, with the tensiometers to ground truth that so that you could see that. And I thought that was really helpful too. And like where I think there's a lot of significant opportunities for scaling up these kind of projects, especially people like groundwater systems out in like the Rio Grande, the Eastern Plains, augmentation groups. That can be some real expensive water in a lot of augmentation groups. Been working with some groups in the South Platte where they're paying $60, $70 an acre foot for their water. And it's like, okay, that provides an opportunity here where maybe this makes a lot of sense for them financially. And surface water systems with a reservoir. So there's a lot of options out there. And already, I mean, I put a line under here because who knows, things can always fall through and you never know from one day to the next. But we're already trying to build some projects for as early as next year to scale these up in Pueblo County, Lower South Platte, Republican River Basin, Dolores Water Conservancy District, but really open to projects in other parts of the state. A big key about this is even though with this current grant program, we were able to fund individual producers, going forward, we're really trying to pool groups of producers together who are under the same system, who are interested in doing this. That way, we can really quantify the impacts of doing this at scale. And that really excited for that kind of work. So I'm going to stop there and just we have last few times for questions.
Yeah, there was a question from Ben. TJ, did you see Ben's question in the chat? And you are muted.
Yeah, I'm just finding his question.
So he's asking about the interval in terms of just how often you were irrigating and whether that the interval between irrigations was closer when you when you were using the sensors. Did that more closely match what you would expect from that parabolic curve in terms of the use of the crop as it grows through the season? If I'm understanding his question correctly. And Ben, you can correct me if I've misunderstood that.
Yes. I understand your question. And yeah, especially in 25 when we had a realistic threshold, uh, they were calling for water more frequently in the middle of the season, almost as fast as I could keep up, as fast as I could start the field and get done and get back around, uh, would be how fast I'd have to return. But early and late, it was more stretched out.
So $1,000 and then you have an annual subscription. What's your annual subscription?
$250.
And that's per probe.
Yep.
You need one at the top and the bottom of the field, so you have that $1,000 initial investment, and then you're spending $500 per field after that. Is that correct? But it,
Yeah. Your initial investment, if you're going to put two probes in a field, is $2,000,
mhm.
and then $500 a year after that for two probes.
And you figure, based on the lifespan, how long you think these will work, that
Five
they
5 years
at
is what
least
I
5 years,
used.
maybe,
Yep.
that's money well spent once you get these
Yeah.
dialed in.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yeah. So for us on a typical field, 40 acres, uh, 10 or $20 an acre, pretty small investment, uh, for the information we got.
Now that you know you could use your tensiometers and that they were giving you readings that were pretty close to what you got from the sensors, could you just use tensiometers?
I would use maybe tensiometers hooked up to a wireless data logger, I would not use uh, the analog reader ones that I had to go out walk through my corn in August to go read the gauges manually. I would not use those, but um, if I could hook them up like I did the first year to a wireless system, I think I could probably make sense of that Cinnabar numbers now, which would
Uh,
bring down the cost of the sensors quite a bit.
a question, what is your average furrow length?
Quarter miles.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's if there's any other questions, now is a good time to ask them. You can unmute or you can put them in the chat.
Hey, TJ, do you irrigate every row or every other row?
Every other. So 60-inch spacing.
Thanks.
And for your field, for this one that you've done the trial on, how long is it typically taking then to get across the field with just the wetted edge?
To reach the tail end of the field. Is that what you're asking?
Uh-huh.
Uh, Somewhere like 6 to 12 hours to reach the tail end, and that's running a 2-inch siphon pretty fast. It takes a lot of water to get to the end on this. There's a 0.5% slope as all these fields drop
And
five, 6 feet, 5, 6 feet in a quarter mile.
these are clean furrows, no residue.
Yeah, clean and sometimes wheel packed and rolled and every other thing we can do to try and get the water to go.
Any parting comments just in terms of advice that you would offer anybody else that's looking to do this, whether their fields are large or small? And then, you've been doing it on a row crop. You talked about, kind of hesitancy and probably needs some better data before you would dive over into the vegetable side. But what about forages? Do you think this would work equally well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It'd be a little bit challenging. The same as I got to work around equipment passes. Um, Forage guy's gonna have to work about, equipment passes, work around equipment passes there. If your probes are calling for water and you got to cut it next week, maybe you're not going to be able to work with that. But definitely, uh, as far as the crop, the data could be useful for forages. I would say just pick whatever is most interesting to you. Like that's kind of why I picked corn. I know we use a lot of water. I like growing corn. Um, I know we can grow big crops of corn. So I was invested in it and wanted to make sure it worked, and I made it work. I think you can make it work for whatever is important to you.
All right. Well, I guess that's it on the questions. So we're up against the hour, so we're going to wrap it up. Really appreciate your time and a great presentation, TJ. Really interesting. And same, Greg. Thanks for just sharing over on just kind of the broader perspective on where those sensors make sense and don't. Again, this webinar was recorded, so we'll have that up on our website, and we'll also have TJ's slides available as well. If you have any questions, you can feel free to just email me, phil@brinkinc.biz, and if those are questions specific to TJ's presentation, I'll be happy, or Greg's, I'll be happy to send those on to those guys, and they can respond. So I do appreciate you joining us today for this presentation, and hope you have a wonderful afternoon. This concludes today's webinar.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Yep. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.